My name is Haley, and I just turned 16 last week. I was a happy high school junior in Portland, Oregon, living with my parents, Diana and Mark, and my younger brother, Travis. We were always close, or at least I thought we were. Everything changed at my birthday dinner when instead of car keys or a new phone, my parents handed me a card that changed everything. Inside was the news that I was moving to Seattle to live with my Aunt Maggie in 2 weeks. No discussion, no choice. Just an unexpected bombshell on what should have been the happiest day of my year. If you're watching from Seattle, leave a comment. Maybe we'll cross paths soon. Like and subscribe for the next part of my unexpected journey. Before my 16th birthday, my life in Portland was everything I could have wanted. I had amazing friends, good grades, and what I thought was a perfectly normal family. Our house was in a quiet neighborhood with big trees lining the streets. Every morning, I would wake up to the smell of coffee brewing downstairs and the sound of my dad humming while he cooked breakfast. My mum would be checking her emails at the kitchen table, and my brother Travis would be scrambling to finish homework he should have done the night before. At school, I had my place. I wasn't the most popular girl, but I had friends who mattered. Jordan and Alyssa had been my best friends since 7th grade. Jordan with her wild curly hair and loud laugh that teachers were always shushing in the hallways. Alyssa was quieter but fiercely loyal, the kind of friend who would stay up until 3 in the morning texting you through a crisis. We had our weekend traditions, Friday movie nights at whoever's house, had the least parental supervision, Saturday morning breakfasts at Maple Street Cafe, and Sunday study sessions that usually devolved into gossip within the first hour. The drama club was my sanctuary. I wasn't the star, but I loved being part of creating something magical. Last spring we put on A Midsummer Night's Dream and I played Hermia. The feeling of becoming someone else, even for just a couple of hours on stage, was intoxicating. Ms. Winters, our drama teacher, said I had a natural talent for conveying emotion. That meant everything to me. My previous birthdays had always been special family occasions. When I turned 10, my parents surprised me with a backyard carnival, complete with cotton candy and a bouncy house. For my 13th, we went to the coast for the weekend and stayed in a cute bed and breakfast, where we could hear the ocean from our windows. My 15th was a sleepover with 8 girls squeezed into our basement with more pizza and ice cream than we could eat, watching movies until dawn, while my parents miraculously slept through our shrieking laughter. Then there was Ethan Parker. We had chemistry together, both the class and the feeling. He sat behind me sometimes, tugging gently on my ponytail to ask for a pencil or to pass me notes with terrible science puns. His eyes were this impossible shade of green, and when he smiled, I swear time slowed down a little. We weren't dating, not officially, but there was something there. The week before my birthday, he asked if I wanted to study together for our upcoming test. I spent 3 hours picking out the perfect casual outfit that would somehow make me look effortlessly beautiful. Junior year was supposed to be everything. I was going to get my driver's license, maybe even an old car if I saved enough from my summer lifeguarding job. Ethan and I would move from study partners to something more. I would get the lead in the fall play. College tours would begin, and the future I had always imagined would start taking shape. Looking back, I can see the signs that something was wrong at home. Dad stopped talking about work projects at dinner. Mum started clipping coupons and checking prices more carefully at the grocery store. There were hushed conversations that would stop when I entered a room. Once I caught Mum crying in the laundry room, but she brushed it off as allergies. I believed her because I wanted to, because the alternative was too scary to consider. The morning of my birthday started like any other special day in our house. Mum made French toast with strawberries, my favourite breakfast since I was little. Travis gave me a bracelet he had made in his art class, painted beads strung on leather cord. It was lopsided and perfect. My parents gave me a small jewellery box containing a silver necklace with a star pendant. Normal, thoughtful gifts that gave no hint of what was coming. I spent hours getting ready for my birthday dinner that night. I straightened my usually wavy brown hair until it shone. I borrowed Alyssa's sparkly hair clip and Jordan's lucky earrings. My outfit was new dark jeans and a blue top that Mum said matched my eyes. I felt pretty and grown up and ready for whatever surprise my parents had planned. Some kids in my grade had gotten cars for their 16th birthdays. I wasn't expecting anything that extravagant, but maybe a new phone since mine was constantly dying, or even just the promise of driving lessons. Antonio's was my favourite restaurant, an Italian place, with checkered tablecloths and waiters who knew our names. When we arrived, they had our usual corner booth ready, and the owner came over to wish me happy birthday. We ordered my favourites, bruschetta, to start fettuccine alfredo for my main course, and I knew there would be tiramisu with a candle for dessert. Everything felt so normal, so perfect. The last perfect evening before everything fell apart. The waiter had just cleared our dinner plates when Mum and Dad exchanged that look. You know, the one parents have when they're communicating without words? Dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a birthday card in a pale blue envelope. Before dessert, "We have something for you," he said, sliding it across the table. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Maybe there was a gift card inside, or the keys to a car after all. I smiled as I tore it open, pulling out a card with balloons on the front. Something fluttered out onto the table. Not keys, not a gift card. A brochure for a high school I'd never heard of. Roosevelt High School, Seattle. Inside the card, in my mother's neat handwriting: "Happy birthday, Haley. We love you so much and want the best for you. Due to circumstances beyond our control, you'll be moving to Seattle to live with Aunt Maggie in 2 weeks. We know this is sudden, but it's necessary. We'll explain everything. All our love, Mum and Dad." I read it twice, certain I was misunderstanding. Is this a joke? The look on their faces told me it wasn't. Mum reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled away. "We wanted to tell you sooner," Dad said, his voice lower than usual, "but we needed to make sure everything was arranged first." Arranged? My voice came out too loud. People at nearby tables glanced over. "You arranged for me to move to another state without even asking me." "Honey, please," Mum whispered. "Let's discuss this calmly." "Calmly? You just told me I'm being shipped off to Aunt Maggie's and I'm supposed to be calm." Dad sighed deeply, then spoke quietly. "I lost my job 6 months ago. We've been trying to find a solution, but the savings are gone. The house..." His voice cracked. "The house is being foreclosed next month." The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. 6 months. You've been hiding this for 6 months. Mum was crying now, silent tears trailing down her cheeks. "We thought your father would find something else quickly. Then we thought we could sell the house before things got this bad. We tried everything, Haley. We're moving into a small apartment temporarily," Dad continued. "It's only got 1 bedroom. Travis is going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a while." "Why can't I stay with them too?" The question came out as a plea. "They don't have space for both of you, and Aunt Maggie has that big house all to herself since Uncle Rick moved out. The school district is excellent. This is the best opportunity for you, honey." Opportunity. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You're tearing me away from my friends, my school, everything I know, and calling it an opportunity." The waiter approached with my birthday tiramisu, saw our faces, and quietly retreated. "I'm not going," I said firmly. "You can't make me." Dad's expression hardened slightly. "Haley, you're 16. Yes, we can." The drive home was excruciating. I stared out the window, tears streaming down my face, while Travis looked between us all in confusion. He hadn't known either. When we got home, I ran straight to my room, locked the door, and collapsed on my bed, my whole body shaking with sobs. My phone buzzed with birthday messages from friends who had no idea my world had just imploded. I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of them. Around midnight, I finally texted Jordan and Alyssa. "My parents are sending me to live in Seattle in 2 weeks. Not kidding. We'll explain tomorrow." Their responses came immediately. Disbelief, outrage, promises to help me fight this. But deep down, I already knew. The decision had been made without me, and nothing I could say would change it. Morning came after a night of barely any sleep. I heard my family moving around downstairs, but couldn't face them yet. Around 10, there was a gentle knock on my door. "Haley, can we talk?" Mum's voice was hesitant. I didn't answer, but I didn't stop her when she used the key to unlock my door. She sat on the edge of my bed looking exhausted. "We should have told you sooner about our financial situation," she admitted. "We were trying to protect you, but we ended up making it worse." "Why can't I stay here? Find a friend to live with anything but moving to Seattle." She explained more details then, how Dad had been secretly driving for a rideshare company, but it wasn't enough. How they had maxed out credit cards trying to keep up mortgage payments. How Aunt Maggie had offered immediately when they finally admitted how bad things were. Later that day, Travis came to my room. His eyes were red. "Did you know I have to go to Grandma and Grandpa's?" he asked, his voice small. I shook my head and opened my arms. My little brother, who usually pretended to be too cool for hugs, climbed onto my bed and cried against my shoulder. He was only 12. Too young to have his world torn apart like this. "It's not fair," he whispered. "No," I agreed, holding him tight. "It's not." At that moment, my anger at my parents doubled. Not just for what they were doing to me, but for what they were doing to Travis too. Splitting us up, separating us when we needed each other most. I spent the next few days in desperate denial, searching for any alternative to moving to Seattle. My first plan was to ask if I could live with Jordan or Alyssa. Their parents had always liked me, and I was a good student, not a troublemaker. Surely one of them would take me in. Jordan's mum was sympathetic when I asked, but ultimately shook her head. Honey, taking in someone else's child is a huge legal responsibility, and your parents have made their decision. Alyssa's parents didn't even consider it. This is a family matter, Haley. We can't interfere. I researched legal emancipation online, but quickly realized it wasn't a viable option. I would need to prove I could support myself financially, and my lifeguarding job certainly wouldn't cover rent, food, and everything else on its own. When I presented these alternatives to my parents, they listened but remained unmoved. "We understand you're upset," Dad said, "but we've considered all the options. This is what's best right now." "Best for who?" I shot back. "Not for me, not for Travis. For all of us," Mum insisted. "Your education has to come first, and Aunt Maggie can provide stability while we get back on our feet." The guidance counselor at school, Mrs. Patel, was more understanding than most adults. She let me cry in her office and didn't offer empty platitudes. "This kind of sudden change is traumatic," she acknowledged, "and you have every right to be angry and sad." "Can the school do anything?" I asked hopefully. She shook her head. "Your parents have legal custody, Haley. As long as they're providing for your needs, even if it's through your aunt, there's nothing the school can do to intervene." Saying goodbye to Jordan and Alyssa was brutal. We met at our favourite cafe, a quirky place with mismatched furniture and the best hot chocolate in Portland. "We'll visit you," Jordan promised, her eyes fierce with determination. "Seattle's only 3 hours away. And we'll video chat every day," Alyssa added. "It'll be like you never left." But we all knew it wouldn't be the same. They gave me friendship bracelets they had made together, and I blinked back tears as they tied them on my wrist alongside Travis's. The conversation with Ethan was awkward and painful. We were sitting on a bench outside school, and he kept fidgeting with his backpack strap. "That really sucks," he said when I told him. "Seattle's cool though, my cousins live there." "Yeah, I guess." I had hoped for more from him. Some declaration of feelings that would make this goodbye meaningful. Instead, he just seemed uncomfortable. "We can still text and stuff," he offered. "Sure," I replied, knowing we probably wouldn't. In a desperate move, I called my grandparents to ask if they could take me too, not just Travis. "Oh, sweetie," Grandma said, her voice cracking. "We wish we could, but our place is so small and the stairs would be hard on your grandfather's knees with 2 of you running up and down. Your mum and dad are making the best decision they can in a terrible situation." It was during this conversation that I learned more about how bad things really were. My father's company had downsized his entire department. He had been sending out resumes every day for months with barely any interviews. The foreclosure notice had come 3 weeks ago, giving them 30 days to vacate. "They shielded you kids from it as long as they could," Grandma explained. "Maybe too long." But they were hoping for a miracle that never came. I tried calling Aunt Maggie directly, thinking maybe I could convince her I wasn't ready to move yet, that I needed more time. She was kind but firm. "Your room is all ready for you, Haley. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I promise I'll try to make it as comfortable as possible for you." My final attempt was offering to get a job to help with family finances. If I work after school and weekends, maybe we could afford a bigger apartment, one where we could all stay together. Dad shook his head sadly. "Even with that, we couldn't make it work right now, and your job needs to be school, not trying to support the family. That's our responsibility, even if we've messed it up." I tried bargaining then. "I'll keep my grades up. I won't complain about anything. I'll help more around the house. Please don't send me away." Mum pulled me into a hug I was too angry to return. "This isn't about your behaviour, sweetie. You've done nothing wrong. This is about us not being able to provide what you need right now." After days of fighting, researching, pleading, and bargaining, the crushing realization finally hit me: nothing was going to change their minds. In 2 weeks, I would be living in Seattle whether I wanted to or not. With just 10 days left before the move, I had to start the painful process of packing up my life. Mum brought cardboard boxes from the grocery store and stacked them in my room. I stared at them for a full day before I could bring myself to start filling them. "You can take whatever fits in the car," Dad said. "The rest we'll have to sell or donate." I stood in my room looking at 16 years of accumulated belongings. My bookshelf overflowing with young adult novels and play scripts. the bulletin board covered in photos and ticket stubs, the stuffed animals I pretended I was too old for but still arranged on my bed every morning. Where do you even start when packing up your entire life? I began with clothes, folding each item carefully, like I was performing a ritual. Some things were easy to sort, yes, to my favorite jeans and hoodies. No to the fancy dresses I rarely wore. Others were harder. The faded t-shirt from summer camp 3 years ago. Did I need it? No. Did I want to leave it behind? Also no. In my closet, I found a shoebox full of childhood mementos. Birthday cards from when I turned 10, the program from my first school play in 4th grade where I had exactly 2 lines as a tree, a dried corsage from the 8th grade dance. Each item was a thread connecting me to my past, to this house, to Portland. How many of these threads could I cut before I lost myself completely? My last day of school was surreal. Teachers who had heard the news gave me sympathetic smiles and said things like, "Seattle has great opportunities," and "change can be good for growth." My classmates signed a card, most with generic messages, "We'll miss you," and "Stay in touch." Only a few seemed to really understand what was happening. Ms. Winters, my drama teacher, hugged me tightly after class. "The theatre will miss your light, Hayley. But remember, wherever you go, you take that light with you." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That afternoon, Jordan, Alyssa, and I went to our cafe one last time. They had pooled their money to buy me a care package, a journal with a Portland skyline on the cover, my favourite chocolate, a framed photo of the 3 of us from homecoming, and a playlist they had curated called "Until We Meet Again." "This isn't goodbye," Jordan insisted, though her voice wobbled. "It's just see you later." 3 hours isn't that far, Alyssa added. "We'll come visit on long weekends." We all knew it might not be that simple, but we pretended to believe it. What surprised me was the response from people I hadn't considered close friends. Madison from my English class organised an impromptu gathering at the park after school. About 20 kids showed up with cupcakes and a handmade banner that said, "We'll miss you, Hayley." They all signed a Portland Trailblazers hat for me to remember home by. The gesture from these casual acquaintances nearly broke me. The day before we left, I took a long walk through my neighbourhood. I passed the elementary school where Travis and I had learned to read and write, the corner store where we bought popsicles in summer, the tree I had climbed on a dare in 5th grade, resulting in a sprained ankle and 2 weeks on crutches. I tried to memorize everything, the crack in the sidewalk shaped like Florida the house, with the purple door, the way the afternoon light filtered through the maple trees. Mrs. Gonzalez, our next-door neighbour, who had been like a grandmother to me, was watering her garden when I walked by. She set down her hose and enveloped me in a hug that smelled of soil and rose perfume. "I've watched you grow up, Chiquita," she said, patting my cheek. "You are strong, stronger than you know. This is not the end of your story, only a new chapter." Back at home, Travis was sitting on my bed watching me sort through a box of old school papers. "Will you still help me with my math homework?" he asked in a small voice, like over video chat. "Of course I will," I promised, ruffling his hair. "Anytime." "I don't want to go to Grandma and Grandpa's," he confessed. "Grandpa snores so loud and they go to bed at like 9 o'clock. I laughed despite myself. "At least they have that cat you like." "Yeah," he picked at a loose thread on my comforter. "But they don't have you." Yes, ma'am. Our last family dinner at home was takeout pizza because most of the kitchen was already packed. We sat on the living room floor using paper plates and plastic cups. Dad tried to keep the conversation light, talking about a funny customer he had driven the day before. Mum kept taking pictures of us for memories. Travis and I exchanged glances, playing along for their sake. That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through my phone looking at photos from the past year. School dances, beach trips, ordinary days that I had taken for granted. Around 3 a.m, I crept downstairs and into the backyard. The moon was bright enough to illuminate the old swing set Dad had built when I was 7. It was too small for me now, but I sat on it anyway, swinging gently and listening to the familiar creaks of the chains. Morning arrived too quickly. I got dressed mechanically, choosing comfortable clothes for the 3-hour drive. When I went downstairs, Mum was making pancakes in a single pan that hadn't been packed yet. "Your favourite for the road," she said with forced cheerfulness. The car was already packed, a Tetris game of boxes and suitcases, with just enough space for me in the back seat. Dad was checking the oil and tyre pressure one last time. The house looked strange, half empty, with rectangular patches of brighter paint where pictures had hung. Saying goodbye to Travis was the hardest part. Grandma and Grandpa had picked him up earlier to take him to their house, but he ran back to give me one more hug as we were about to leave. "It's not forever," I told him, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Just until Mom and Dad figure things out." He nodded against my shoulder, and I could feel his tears soaking into my shirt. Dad had to gently pry him away so we could leave. As we backed out of the driveway, I turned to look at our house one last time. It wasn't perfect. The paint was peeling in places, and one of the shutters hung crooked, but it was home. My home. And now it would belong to strangers who would never know about the height marks on the kitchen door frame, or the secret compartment I had discovered in the upstairs hallway. I watched it disappear from view as we turned the corner, and with it, the life I had always known. The drive to Seattle stretched out in painful silence. I sat in the back seat with my headphones on, not actually listening to music, but using them as a barrier against conversation. Outside the window, the landscape gradually changed from Portland's urban sprawl to the farmland and forests of southern Washington, then back to civilization as we approached Seattle. Mount Rainier appeared on the horizon, massive and snow-capped, indifferent to my personal tragedy. Aunt Maggie lived in a neighborhood called Queen Anne, in a narrow 3-story house with bay windows and a small front garden. It was objectively nice, much nicer than our house in Portland, but it might as well have been on another planet. Mum squeezed my hand as Dad parked in front. "Give it a chance, Hayley. For us." I nodded robotically and got out of the car. Aunt Maggie was already rushing down the front steps, arms outstretched. My mother's sister was younger by 5 years, single, and worked as an architect. I had only met her a handful of times at family gatherings. "Hayley, look at you all grown up." She hugged me tightly, smelling of expensive perfume. "I'm so excited to have you stay with me. I've been getting everything ready." Her enthusiasm made me feel even more hollow. I managed a weak smile as she led us inside. The house was impeccably decorated in shades of grey and blue with sleek modern furniture that looked like it came from a design magazine. Everything was clean and perfectly arranged without the comfortable clutter of a family home. No stray shoes by the door. No magnets holding artwork on the refrigerator. No evidence that anyone actually lived here. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right," Aunt Maggie said. "I hope you like it. I wasn't sure about your taste these days." The room was larger than mine in Portland, with a queen-sized bed covered in what looked like a dozen pillows. The walls were painted a soft blue, and there was a white desk under the window overlooking the street. A bookshelf stood empty, waiting for my books. It was picture-perfect and utterly soulless. "It's really nice," I said, because that's what was expected. "Thank you. I got you some new bedding, but if you don't like it, we can exchange it," she said, hovering in the doorway. "And that corkboard is for your photos or whatever you want to put up. Make it your own." Dad brought up my boxes and suitcases while Mom and Aunt Maggie discussed practical matters downstairs. School registration, bus routes, house rules. I sat on the edge of the too-perfect bed feeling like an intruder. Unpacking was a surreal experience. My clothes looked wrong hanging in the pristine closet. My books seemed out of place on the empty shelf. I put the framed photo from Jordan and Alyssa on the nightstand and hung the Portland Trailblazers hat on a hook by the door, small acts of defiance against the newness of everything. My parents didn't stay long. They had a 4-hour drive back to Portland, and then more packing to do at our house. The goodbye in Aunt Maggie's immaculate living room was awkward and tearful. "We'll call you tonight," Mum promised, hugging me tightly, "and we'll come visit as soon as we're settled in the apartment." "You'll be okay," Dad said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You're the strongest person I know, Hayley." I wanted to scream that I didn't want to be strong. I wanted my life back. But I just nodded and let them go. That first night, I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed listening to the strange noises of a new house. A pipe clanked somewhere. The heating system hummed differently than ours at home. Outside, the street sounds were all wrong, more traffic, different patterns. I texted Jordan and Alyssa. "Made it to Seattle. House is nice, I guess. Feels like I'm staying at a hotel." Their responses came quickly. Sympathy, encouragement, promises to stay connected. But already I could sense a subtle shift. They were still in Portland, still in the life we had shared. I was elsewhere, disconnected. Roosevelt High School was 3 times the size of my school in Portland. On my first day, Aunt Maggie walked me to the front office where a counselor was waiting with my schedule and a map. "You'll find we have excellent programs here," the counselor said brightly, "especially in the performing arts, which I see you were involved with at your previous school." I nodded vaguely, clutching my new backpack. The hallways were a maze of identical lockers and unfamiliar faces. Everyone seemed to move in established patterns, like a choreographed dance I hadn't learned. In each class, teachers introduced me with variations of, "This is Hayley, she just moved here from Portland." Some students smiled politely. Most barely looked up. Lunchtime was the worst. The cafeteria was enormous and packed with students sitting in clearly defined social groups. I got my food and stood frozen tray in hand, scanning for somewhere to sit. I finally found an empty spot at the end of a table and ate quickly, pretending to be absorbed in my phone. The teachers were nice enough, but they didn't know me. They didn't know that I had gotten the highest grade on Mrs. Wilson's notoriously difficult poetry analysis last year. They didn't know that I could memorize lines faster than anyone else in drama club. Here I was, just the new girl, a blank slate no one was particularly interested in filling in. After school, Aunt Maggie picked me up full of questions about my day that I answered with monosyllables. She was trying so hard, and I knew I should appreciate it, but her enthusiasm felt like sandpaper on my raw emotions. That weekend, I had my first video call with my parents from their new apartment. It was tiny, with boxes stacked against the walls and a futon instead of a real couch. They put on cheerful faces, asking about school and telling me how Travis was doing at our grandparents'. They carefully avoided mentioning their own struggles, but I could see the strain in their faces. Video chats with Jordan and Alyssa became less frequent as the days passed. They were busy with rehearsals for the fall play, the one I should have been in. Their conversations were full of inside jokes from school and references to people I knew, but was rapidly losing connection with. Aunt Maggie tried in her own way. She bought tickets to a local production of Wicked, remembering I loved theatre. She asked about my favourite foods and tried to cook them, though her kitchen was clearly more for show than use. One weekend, she took me on a tour of Seattle's Highlights Pike Place Market, the Space Needle, the waterfront. "I know this isn't what you wanted," she said, as we watched the ferries cross Puget Sound, "but I hope you can find things to like about Seattle." I managed a small smile, the first genuine one in weeks. The bookstore we passed looked cool. Encouraged, she took me there the next day. Elliott Bay Book Company was a sprawling multi-level store with wooden shelves and cozy reading nooks. For the first time since arriving in Seattle, I felt a flicker of interest. I found the drama section and lost myself in browsing plays for nearly an hour, while Aunt Maggie patiently waited, clearly relieved to see me engaged in something. As the weeks passed, my resentment toward my parents grew. Every call felt more distant. They were dealing with their own adjustments. New jobs, both working retail, now a significant step down for my father. The cramped apartment, navigating their changed financial reality. I knew they were struggling too, but it was hard to sympathize when I felt so abandoned. My grades began to slip. I turned in assignments late or not at all. In drama class, which I had reluctantly joined at the counselor's suggestion, I sat in the back and barely participated. I declined invitations from classmates who made tentative overtures of friendship. A girl named Zoe, who sat next to me in English, asked if I wanted to join her study group, and I made up an excuse about having plans with my aunt. Physical symptoms started to manifest. I lost my appetite and picked at the meals Aunt Maggie carefully prepared. Sleep became elusive, and I developed dark circles under my eyes. Headaches became my constant companion, a dull throbbing at my temples that matched the ache in my heart. 3 weeks after moving to Seattle, I came home from school to find Aunt Maggie on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't notice me at first, and I caught the tail end of her conversation. "I'm worried about her, Diana. She barely talks, hardly eats. It's like living with a ghost. Yes, I know it's an adjustment, but this seems like more than that. Maybe she should talk to someone professional." I let my backpack drop loudly to the floor. Aunt Maggie spun around, her face flushing as she quickly ended the call with my mother. "Hayley, I didn't hear you come in. How was school?" "Were you talking about me?" I demanded. She sighed, setting her phone down. "Yes, your mum called to check in and I was sharing my concerns." "What concerns? I'm fine." The lie sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Honey, you're not fine." And that's completely understandable given the circumstances, but shutting down isn't helping you. Something in me snapped. Weeks of suppressed anger came flooding out. Of course I'm not fine. My parents shipped me off like excess baggage when things got tough. They split up our family instead of keeping us together. And now they're pretending everything's normal when nothing will ever be normal again. Aunt Maggie didn't flinch at my outburst. "There's more to the story than you know, Hayley." "Like what?" She hesitated, then said carefully, "It's not just financial issues. Your parents, They've been having problems in their marriage. The stress of the job loss and financial struggles made things worse. They're trying to work through it, but they needed space to do that. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They're getting divorced. Not necessarily, but they recognized they needed time to focus on their relationship without the stress of parenting two teenagers in a cramped apartment while rebuilding their financial stability. I stumbled to a chair, my legs suddenly weak. Why didn't they tell me? They wanted to protect you. Maybe that was wrong, but they thought the financial reason would be easier for you to handle. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? Aunt Maggie called after me. Out, I need to think. I spent hours walking along the Seattle waterfront, watching ferries cross the Sound, and seagulls swoop for dropped food. The grey water matched my mood as I tried to process this new information. My parents' marriage was in trouble. Had I been so self-absorbed that I hadn't noticed? Were there signs I had missed or ignored? When I finally returned to Aunt Maggie's house, it was nearly dark. She was sitting on the front steps, clearly worried. I was about to call the police, she said, standing as I approached. I'm sorry, I mumbled. I needed space. Inside, she made us both hot chocolate, and we sat at the kitchen island in silence for a while. When my husband left, she said finally, I thought my world was ending. I looked up in surprise. I knew Uncle Rick had moved out years ago, but no one had ever explained why. He cheated with his assistant. Classic story. She gave a bitter laugh. I was so angry. At him, at her, at myself for not seeing it coming. I shut everyone out for months. What changed, Mum? Time. Friends who refused to let me isolate myself. And eventually, the realization that staying angry was only hurting me, not him. She reached across the island to touch my hand. I'm not saying you shouldn't be upset with your parents. You have every right to be. But don't let that anger define you or stop you from building a life here. That night, I sent my parents a long, emotional email. I told them how betrayed I felt not just by the move, but by their secrecy, how I felt like a problem they had solved by shipping me away, how I missed Travis and our home and my friends. I wrote until my fingers ached and tears blurred my vision, then hit send before I could change my mind. The next morning, instead of a reply, my phone rang. It was my parents on video chat, both looking like they hadn't slept. We got your email, Mum said, her eyes red-rimmed. You're right. We handled this all wrong. We thought we were protecting you, Dad added. But we ended up hurting you more. For the first time, they told me the whole truth. How Dad's job loss had created financial strain that exposed cracks in their relationship. How they had been seeing a counselor when they could afford it. How the foreclosure had forced them to make impossible choices. We love you so much, Hayley, Mum said, crying openly now. Sending you to Maggie's was never about getting rid of you. It was about making sure you had stability while everything else was falling apart. I was crying too by then, alone in my room in Aunt Maggie's house, connected to my parents only through a screen. I miss you guys. I miss Travis. I miss home. We miss you too, sweetheart. More than you can imagine. The conversation wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. A crack in the wall of resentment I had built. The following weekend, Travis came to visit with our grandparents. Seeing him walk into Aunt Maggie's living room made everything feel slightly more real, more connected to my past life. Your room is way bigger than mine at Grandma's, Gadin, he said after inspecting it thoroughly, and you don't have to eat bran cereal every morning. I laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign in my throat. True. But Grandma makes better cookies than Aunt Maggie. Travis filled in gaps in my understanding of our family situation. He saw our parents more frequently since he was closer, and his 12-year-old perspective was surprisingly insightful. Dad cries sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep, he confided as we explored a park near Aunt Maggie's house. And Mum works all the time. I think they feel really bad about everything. His visit was brief but healing. Having a piece of my old life in my new reality helped bridge the gap between them. The following week, I returned to the bookstore I had liked. The owner, a woman with grey-streaked hair and cat eyeglasses, recognized me. Back for more plays? She asked with a warm smile. Just browsing today, I replied. Well, browse all you want. Books are patient friends. She paused, then added, I'm looking for part-time help on weekends if you're interested. I blinked in surprise. Really? You have good taste in theatre and you treated the books respectfully. 2 points in your favour. Plus you look like you could use somewhere to belong. Can't sit in. Her directness caught me off guard. I just moved here from Portland. I know, you mentioned it last time. So interested. I found myself nodding. Yes, I think I am. In English class the next day, Zoe asked again if I wanted to join her study group. We're meeting at the library after school to work on that essay. No pressure, but you're welcome to come. This time I said yes. The group included Zoe and 3 other students I recognized from class. They were discussing The Great Gatsby, which I had already read at my old school. What did you think about the symbolism of the green light? One boy asked me directly. Instead of the minimal response I would have given weeks earlier, I found myself engaging in the conversation, sharing my perspective. When I mentioned my interpretation of Daisy's character, Zoe's eyes lit up. That's exactly what I was trying to say last week. Nobody got it. After the study session, Zoe invited me to get coffee. Over caramel lattes, she told me she had moved to Seattle from Chicago 2 years ago. The first 6 months were hell, she admitted. I hated everything about this place. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else. What changed? I asked. She shrugged. I did, I guess. Stopped fighting so hard against something I couldn't control. Later that week, I noticed a flyer for the school newspaper. They were looking for a photographer for the arts section. On impulse, I wrote down my name and email. Photography had always been a casual hobby. I had an eye for composition, according to my old art teacher, but I had never pursued it seriously. To my surprise, the editor emailed me that evening asking if I had a portfolio. I didn't, but I spent the weekend taking photos around Seattle with my phone and sent her the best ones. 2 days later, I was assigned to photograph the jazz band's upcoming performance. As October turned to November, small changes accumulated. I started decorating my room at Aunt Maggie's, putting up posters and photos, rearranging furniture to make the space feel more like mine. I joined the newspaper staff and discovered I loved capturing moments through my camera. Zoe introduced me to her friends, who were welcoming in a low-key way that didn't feel forced. The weekend job at the bookstore became a sanctuary. The owner, Linda, was a former literature professor who seemed to have read everything ever published. She taught me about inventory systems and special orders, but also about obscure playwrights and poetry movements. The rhythm of shelving books and helping customers grounded me in a way nothing else had since the move. One evening in early November, Ethan from Portland texted me unexpectedly. Saw this and thought of you. Attached was a photo of a theatre marquee advertising auditions for the play we had talked about seeing together. The simple acknowledgement that he still thought of me occasionally was both sweet and a reminder of how life in Portland was continuing without me. Sitting on my bed looking at his text, I had a moment of clarity. I could keep resisting this new reality, holding on to anger and resentment, or I could choose to build something new here while maintaining connections to what mattered from before. The choice, I realized, was entirely mine. The next day, I asked Aunt Maggie if we could repaint my room. The pale blue was nice, but it wasn't me. What color were you thinking? She asked, surprised by my sudden interest. A warm yellow, I replied. Something sunny. That weekend, we went to the hardware store together, chose a paint called Marigold Morning, and spent Sunday transforming my room. Paint splattered on the drop cloths and in our hair, and Aunt Maggie's perfectionist tendencies made her fret about the uneven edge along the ceiling, but by evening, the room glowed with warmth. It looks alive now, she said, surveying our work. Like you. I smiled, realizing she was right. Somewhere in the past weeks, while I was busy being angry and hurt, I had started to come back to life in small, almost imperceptible ways. The choice to paint my room wasn't just about color preference, it was about claiming space, making a mark, acknowledging that this was now part of my story too. 6 months after my birthday, Bombshell, Seattle had begun to feel, if not exactly like home, at least like a place where I belonged. My relationship with Aunt Maggie had evolved from awkward politeness to genuine affection. She wasn't my mother and didn't try to be, but she had become something equally valuable, a friend and mentor who saw me clearly and accepted me completely. You can always stay here, you know, she told me one evening as we cooked dinner together, something that had become our weeknight ritual. Even after your parents get back on their feet. If you want to finish high school here. The offer touched me deeply. Thank you. I might take you up on that. My friend circle had expanded beyond Zoe to include the newspaper staff and several of Linda's regular bookstore customers who were close to my age. We had inside jokes and favorite hangout spots. They weren't replacements for Jordan and Alyssa, but they were important in their own right. My role as the newspaper's photographer had grown. What started as simple event coverage had evolved into photo essays and features. The camera became an extension of myself, a way to observe and connect with my new community. Travis and I video called several times a week. He had adjusted to living with our grandparents better than anyone expected. though he still complained about their early bedtime and obsession with weather reports. He had made the basketball team at his new school and was thriving academically without the stress of our family's crisis hanging over him. "Grandma says I'm growing an inch a month," he told me, standing against the kitchen doorframe, where they marked his height. "I'm going to be taller than Dad soon." My parents were making slow but steady progress. Dad had found a decent job managing an office supply store, not the corporate position he had before, but stable work with growth potential. Mum was taking online classes to update her accounting certifications while working part-time. They were still in the small apartment, but had started saving for a larger place that could accommodate Travis and me for visits. Their marriage had survived the crisis, though not without scars. They were more open with me now about their struggles and their counselling, treating me less like a child to be protected and more like a young adult who deserved honesty. It was painful sometimes, but the transparency healed old wounds. In April, I made my first trip back to Portland. Aunt Maggie drove me down for spring break, dropping me at my parents' apartment before continuing to visit friends in the area. The apartment was small, but had touches of our old home, family photos, Dad's collection of historical biographies, Mum's ceramic vases. "It's good to have you home," Dad said, hugging me tightly. The word home caught in my throat. What was home now? This apartment, Aunt Maggie's house, the house we had lost. I spent one day with Jordan, walking through our old neighborhood, visiting our favorite spots. Our friendship had endured despite the distance, though it had changed shape. We had different daily lives, now different reference points, but the foundation remained strong. "You seem different," she observed as we sat in our old cafe. "More, I don't know, grounded." I considered this. Maybe. I think I've stopped waiting for things to go back to how they were and started building something new instead. Alyssa and I had drifted further apart. Our lunch together was pleasant, but slightly strained, full of stories about people I no longer knew and events I hadn't witnessed. We promised to stay in touch, but both understood that our paths had diverged. The strangest part was seeing our old house with a new family living in it. I walked past one afternoon, stopping across the street to look at the familiar structure, now painted a different colour. A young girl was riding a bike in the driveway, my driveway. I felt a pang of loss, but not the crushing grief I had expected. Back at my parents' apartment, we had a long, honest conversation about the future. They were hoping to buy a modest house by the end of the year, one with enough room for both Travis and me to have our own spaces again. "But we understand if you want to stay in Seattle," Mum said carefully. "You've built a life there now. We don't want to uproot you again." The choice surprised me. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance to return to Portland. Now I found myself weighing options, considering what was best for my education, my growing interest in photography, my new friendships. "Can I think about it?" I asked. They both nodded relief and a touch of sadness in their eyes. They had expected me to choose Seattle, I realized. They had seen my growth from afar and understood what it meant. Back in Seattle, spring brought new opportunities. My photography was selected for a student showcase at a small gallery. Zoe and I made plans to take a summer photography course together at the community college. Linda offered me more hours at the bookstore during summer break. Through the bookstore, I met Nate, a quiet boy with intelligent eyes, who came in looking for books on darkroom photography. When he learned about my interest in photography, he invited me to see the darkroom he had built in his parents' basement. What could have been awkward, we were both naturally reserved, became the beginning of something sweet and tentative, a different kind of first relationship than I would have had with Ethan back in Portland. One of the unexpected benefits of living with Aunt Maggie was her knowledge of college applications and scholarships. As an architect who had navigated competitive programs herself, she helped me research schools with strong visual arts programs and strategize about application essays. "You have a unique perspective to share," she said as we reviewed my draft. "Not many 16-year-olds have navigated such significant life changes with the grace you've shown." I looked at her in surprise. "Grace, I was a complete mess for months." She smiled. "Grace isn't about being perfect. It's about how you find your way back to yourself when life knocks you off balance." As my 17th birthday approached, I reflected on the journey of the past year, the devastation of that 16th birthday announcement, the anger and grief, the slow, painful process of letting go and building anew. The person I had become was different from the girl who had sat in Antonio's restaurant expecting car keys, or a new phone, stronger in some ways, more vulnerable in others, but ultimately more real. For my birthday, Aunt Maggie organized a small party at her house with my Seattle friends. My parents and Travis drove up for the weekend, staying at a nearby hotel. Jordan came too, our first in-person reunion in months. The gathering brought together the separate pieces of my life in a way I hadn't thought possible a year ago. As we sat around Aunt Maggie's dining table, candles glowing on my cake, I looked at these people who loved me, family by blood and family by choice. My parents still weathering their own storms, but finding their way back to solid ground. Travis taller and more confident than when I'd last seen him. Aunt Maggie, who had opened her home and heart to me when I was determined to reject both. Jordan maintaining our friendship across distance. Zoe and Nate and the others who had welcomed me into their world when I finally allowed it. "Make a wish," Mom said as I prepared to blow out the candles. I closed my eyes thinking about what to wish for. A year ago, it would have been simple to go back to my old life, to undo the changes that had been forced upon me. Now I wasn't sure I would make that wish even if I could. Instead, I wished for something different. The wisdom to recognize the gifts within the challenges, the courage to keep building bridges between my past and future, and the strength to embrace change rather than fear it. As I blew out the candles, I realized that the path I had fought so hard against had led me exactly where I needed to be. Not to a perfect life, there was no such thing, but to a richer one than I had imagined possible on that devastating 16th birthday. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," I replied, meaning it in ways they might never fully understand. "For everything. Has life ever forced you down a path you fought against, only to find unexpected gifts along the way? I never would have chosen to leave Portland. But looking back, that unwanted change revealed strengths I never knew I had." Share your own story of unexpected turns in the comments below. And if you're going through your own unwanted change right now, hang in there. Sometimes the paths we resist most lead us exactly where we need to be. Like and subscribe for more real-life stories, and thank you for being part of my journey today.